there's even a law that prevents anyone building anything taller that could obscure the view of the castle. So, from up on the castle crag, I can see most of the central and south side of the city, with stunning views of the Pentland Hills and their ski slopes. Edinburgh Castle was built in 1103 on top of a volcanic rock which erupted hundreds of millions of years ago. It is 440 history when you walk around it. The beautiful Princess Street Gardens cut through the city centre, separating the historic castle and the bustling, busy Princess Street. You can find restaurants, romantic spots to sit or walk, scenic views, and fantastic features such as the Ross Fountain. The fountain was installed in the gardens in 1872, and recently, in 2018, the fountain was revived to look how it would have back when it was made. You can see mermaids, which represent art, science, poetry, and industry. Around the fountain and at the centre, there is a woman. Though the fountain is beautiful, it was not entirely loved by the people of Edinburgh back then, who found it indecent due to nudity. Ross Fountain arrived in leaf in 122 pieces after being part of the Great Exhibition in London 1862. In 2001, the fountain had some work done to it, which meant that water could flow through it again. But this only lasted 5 years until further work was done in more recent times. After refurbishing, it took people in Edinburgh only 19 days to ruin it, and it had to be switched back off again for 4 days. But now it flows as a centerpiece in the West Princess Street Garden. And not just tourists love it, the birds do too. The Princess Street Gardens never used to look like this, though. Before the 1770s, it was a man-made loch called Norloch. This was part of a defence for Old Town to keep English out. Though this wasn't very helpful, as the loch was on the north side of the castle, and the English would likely come from the south. Like I said earlier, hygiene wasn't the best in Edinburgh back then, and the loch became polluted with sewage and waste. It became a common spot for suicides, crime, and some even believed punishment to witches was held in the loch. But there isn't any evidence to support the rumour. The darkness of Norloch continued, and on one day in 1624, 11 women were drowned. And a few years later, George Sinclair, who was a former Scottish mercenary, admitted to incest with his 2 sisters, and they were sentenced to a death drowning in the loch by being placed in a box with a hose